Hi everyone, it's Lara. Thank you so much for watching. Today's video is the second part in my new series, Sewing for Beginners. Last week in the first part I have discussed what is important to know when you want to choose your first sewing machine, so if you missed that part I will link it down below in the description box. And in today's video I will be discussing with you sewing supplies. Especially at the beginning, when you're just buying all the stuff that you need, when you just purchased your first sewing machine, that is quite a lot of money and you don't want to spend more money than necessary. So I will tell you what sewing supplies are really useful also at the beginning for you. So if you're interested in that, then please keep watching, and also make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss any further episodes. And now let's get into this video. So I will be showing you different types of sewing supplies from different categories, and I will always tell you what is absolutely necessary and which things that I'm going to show you are just nice to have. So let's start with scissors, because they are definitely important. You need to be able to cut your fabric and the thread. So I have here those scissors. I've had them for years. They are not really special, they weren't even expensive, but what is important that your scissors should be sharp all the time. So there is a hardware store across the street where I bring them every now and then so that they sharpen them. It's not really expensive, but it makes a huge difference. So you need great scissors that are super sharp. They don't have to be expensive. There's no certain size they need to have. Just, you know, if you go to a sewing supply store, just ask for some standard scissors and you can choose whatever feels great in your hand. Just make sure they're sharp. So this is absolutely necessary. A second thing that is necessary, but you don't need to buy anything special, are any small pointy scissors that you could use if you need to cut something really small or if you need to open stitches. There are special scissors for that, but you do not have to buy them at the beginning. You could use your manicure scissors, which is what I've been doing for the past, let's say, 36 years. I actually never used any special scissors for that. I know it is much easier to use special scissors because they have a little bit bigger opening, they are easier to grasp with your hand, but I'm so used to those and I can work with them really quickly that I never thought about buying anything else. So you do not have to buy any special small scissors for opening stitches at the beginning. You can just use your small pointy manicure scissors and you will be fine, just fine. So there's one more thing. This is absolutely nice to have and not necessary at the beginning. I have also zigzag scissors. They are great for edging. If you cut any excess fabric and you want to have a nice edge that won't fray, you will still need to use a zigzag or any edging stitch for some fabrics, but for like stretchy fabrics it's enough if you cut it with the zigzag scissors, but you do not need them at the beginning. The next thing that you will always need are pins. So I have them in a little box that used to be actually some cream or lotion, and I just put all of my pins inside. There are certain different ways of how to store them. You can have kind of a box that has a sponge on it where you would put the pins in it so that they are easier to pull out, but I have had them like this for years and it's fine for me. Also, it doesn't take too much space. It's all about preference, but if you find something that works better for you, it's great. What I would definitely recommend is to have pins that have colorful heads, because especially if you would be sewing black fabric and you would have only pins that have black heads, you would not see them easily, and it could happen that you forget a pin inside, then you put the piece of clothing on and suddenly something's gonna be poking you, you know, not fun. So definitely buy some that have colorful heads. It proved to be useful to me, so this is something you will definitely need. Then for your sewing machine you will need a set of needles, because what can happen sometimes if you are sewing through many layers, that the needle would break. And what you don't want, it already happened to me also, be sitting at home on Sunday afternoon, you would want to finish a project and you would have no needle at home, no extra needle because you're just broke. So I always have some extra since it happened to me. So there are different brands, and I'm sure that you can buy some generic brands, so it doesn't have to be a brand of needles. So I always have those universal needles. If you have them, you're gonna be fine. You can sew pretty much everything with them. And this is all you need at the beginning, especially if you're just starting with some cotton fabrics that are not too thick. Later on, it is always useful to have different kinds of needles, like needles for stretchy fabric, because the point of the needle is much finer and it's easier to penetrate the fabric. Then you can also use needles for denim and for leather. And this is, as I said, nice to have. They are extremely useful and they make a big difference, but if you're on a budget and you're just learning, then just buy a set of universal needles and you're gonna be fine. So that would be everything about needles and pins. One more thing you will need, and that is super useful, is this chalk that you will use for marking your seams and some other things on your fabric when you are copying the pattern. You will need different colors. 2 different colors are enough, because I have a white one for dark fabric or for anything that's not white. And I have to be honest, I actually don't have another color for white fabric. I just use colored pencils for white fabric and it works great. Yeah, so if you don't want to spend money for a chalk, you can just use colored pencils. The only thing is they don't come out of the fabric as easy as the chalk, which is the big advantage, but they work fine. So, you know, think about what you want to spend, but you would not necessarily need the chalk if you have some colored pencils. And then there is one more thing that I find extremely useful, but you don't have to have it at the beginning, but it is really nice to have, and this is this little fella. That comes in different shapes and colors, and they don't always have this little brush at the end, but this is basically a stitch opener. You know, you can see how pointed it is, and you can also use it for opening buttonholes, but you don't have to have it at the beginning. Next things that I always have at home are threads. I have 2 or 3 boxes of different colors of threads, but this is just because I've been sewing for very many years. They kind of collect over the time, but I think when it comes to the colors, it depends on what fabrics are you sewing. So if you are just about to try a few things out in your sewing machine on some rests of fabrics where you just learn how to sew straight and how to use a zigzag, you can use any color. You can have just one piece of thread, you know, at home and use it all the time. I have always black and white thread at home. I mostly buy more of them at once. And then I have thread organizers that I made myself. I will link the video for this down below. And I have 3 of them, and they are full of threads, or almost full of threads, and I have them ordered by different shades. Like I have some blues, and then I have some different yellows and stuff like that. But I definitely recommend having your thread organized, because they get tangled if you just throw them in a jar or something like that. You know, those things have actually an end here. I hope you can see that. So please camera focus, so you can see there is a ridge, and you can take the end of the thread and pull it through the ridge, and then it won't get tangled. But I have to be honest, sometimes I'm just too lazy or I forget doing that, and then all the threads get tangled and it's just pain in the ass, and I don't like that. So that's why I made myself those organizers, and it's just so much nicer to find whatever shade you need. But you do not have to have that many threads if you are a beginner. If you buy like 2 threads for different colors of your fabrics, just so that you can get used to sewing and that you learn how the different stitches work and the different settings on the machine, 2 of them will definitely work, and you don't need more than that. And also I buy this special threads. They are polyester, I definitely recommend buying polyester threads. Normally I'm all about organic cotton and bamboo and whatever, but when it comes to the thread, you will love polyester because they last so much longer, they don't tear as easily as cotton threads. And over the years I found that this is a place where I do not want to save money. I rather invest in a good thread, and then I know my sewing project will last longer. So this is definitely a tip I would like to give you. One thing that you will need from day one is a measuring tape. I have this simple measuring tape. I had it for years. I don't even know where I bought it, but this is a thing I've bought once and it's gonna probably last till the end of my days. I like hanging it on a hook instead of folding it, because when you fold it too much, this is what happens. I don't like that. But there are also other measuring tapes. They look like that. They come in a box. You pull them out, then they stop, and then there's a button. You push it and they, you know, come back into the box. This is from Burda, for example. I think it was like 7 euros, whatever, and those are a bit less expensive. You don't need this kind of measuring tape. You will be fine with that one. What I would definitely recommend though is to look if you can get one that is as long as possible. So the standard is about 60 inches. If you can get anything that is longer, that would be great, but it is not necessary. So for the beginning, this one would suffice. Next thing that you will definitely need also at the beginning is any kind of a straight guide. I have here a wooden guide that's almost 20 inches long. This is very useful. I think 20 inches is a great thing, also great length. I bought one that has a hole in it. I put a ribbon in it, and I have a little hook on the side of my shelf in this room where I hang this, so that I don't have to look for it. And this is where I also hang the measuring tape on the little hook. But you do not need any special kind of a guide. So if you have an office guide at home like this, that would work too. It is just a little bit shorter, but it's fine. So you don't need to invest in any special guide if you already have one at home. If you don't have a guide at home, then definitely invest in one that is a little bit longer, at least 20 inches, because that's really great to have. And then there is another guide that is nice to have, but it is not necessary for beginners. This is this curved guide. It is transparent, so I hope that you can see it. I think with the reflection of the ring light, it is easier to see. So this guide is very useful whenever you have to mark any curved lines on your fabric or when you're adjusting your pattern. But especially at the beginning, when you're just learning, when you're working on very easy projects, it is not necessary, but it is nice to have for later, and it is definitely something I'm glad I invested in, especially when I'm making patterns for my skirts. So I will link, for example, a video in which I have created my own pattern for a skater skirt. This is where I need this guide, so you can watch the video, then you will know what is it useful for. So, but it is just nice to have, not necessary for beginners. The next thing that is really very important to have at home, I always have at least a few sheets of it, is a paper. This is this semi-transparent paper that you would use for copying your patterns. I have the one from Burda Style. I think there are also other brands, but most of the sewing supply stores that are here in Vienna have only those. I'm gonna open this one. These are just rests, but this is how it looks like. It is a really thin paper and you can see through. So if I would place this behind it, you can see the lines. So this is perfect for copying pattern. And it comes with several sheets in it. They have the standard size, and with one pack of the paper you can copy several patterns or one really large pattern, like for a wedding dress or a huge coat or whatever. Which leads us to sewing patterns. So once you learned the basics, you will want to be sewing clothes probably also. There are different possibilities of how to get patterns. Either you are able to make your own patterns. I'm always trying to explain how to make your own patterns in my sewing videos. I will link the playlist sewing down below. I mostly use a simple tank top or a shirt as a basic, and from that I make my own patterns. So watch the videos if you are interested in knowing how you can make your own patterns. This is one way of how you can get your pattern. The second way is you can buy any magazines. I like Burda magazines, but I don't buy them regularly because the patterns are very repetitive. You know, they come in different variations, but once you are a little bit more skilled, once you understand how a pattern works, you will recognize that there is a certain basic pattern that you can easily adjust yourself, and you don't need to buy every single month a magazine. But what they have in those magazines is they have an overview of all the models that they present there, and then there is a section with, okay, let me hold it like that, with the, okay, I can't hold it like that, that didn't work as I imagined. So then there is a section with the overview of how the patterns look, and then you have an explanation for every single pattern. And then there is this part. These are several sheets with the patterns actually printed on them, and you just have to know how to copy them, how to find them. I will make an extra video where we will copy some simple pattern together so that you know how it works, because for me it is extremely easy now, but I think for someone who has never done that, it can be really difficult to see through those numerous lines. So I hope that I can help you there out. So this is another way. The disadvantage of buying magazines is that you might end up with a magazine where there's just one pattern you like and that's it, which very often happened to me. So over the years I stopped buying the magazines. What I do mostly, I just order my patterns. Like when I filmed my video with the Galadriel look, which I can also link down below, I used this pattern for the dress. I bought this from the Burda shop. I can also link this down below. Those patterns are international. They are written also in English and in German. And what comes with it is they have mostly patterns for different sizes. Camera focus, please. So this one is for US size 8 till 14. And I think they have like different groupings, so you could buy one for smaller sizes and bigger sizes. And then inside there are sheets with the pattern that you need to copy for your size, because there are lines for sizes from 8 till 14. So you will still need this pattern paper that I have shown you before. So this is another way. Also Burda and maybe also some other shops offer downloads of patterns, but I don't find it really great because you will use a lot of paper and the pattern is going to be really thick because you will have to print it on the classical paper. So I have here an example. I downloaded a pattern for a costume, and I just printed out yet. I just printed out, but I didn't cut it apart yet, so, or glued it together. So what you will get, there will be an overview of the pattern, and then you will have single sheets of A4 paper, the typical office size of paper, with lines on it for different sizes. So you have to cut out the rectangles with the pattern. There are marks on the sides, like here 1C, 1D, 2C, and so on. And you would have to put it together like a puzzle so that you get this. So you will need a lot of space for putting together the pattern, a lot of paper, a lot of tape. It takes time and I find it personally very annoying. The advantage of this is it is a little bit less expensive than ordering this pattern. It mostly costs like $3 or $4 less than this pattern, like almost a half. And you don't need to pay for shipping, but as I said, there's a lot of paper involved and a lot of extra work. I'm not a big fan of those, but some patterns are available only as a download version, so sometimes you just won't have any other option. If you find a certain pattern you really want and there is only the download version, then you will have to work with that. But this is also a possibility. I mostly have a big envelope where I store it, and then I put the pattern together, and then I fold it and keep it with all the sizes. just in case someone would want to borrow the pattern from me and copy it for another size. And there are some patterns where I just cut out my size when I was like, you know, if someone wants that, they can download it themselves. But lately I've been also thinking about friends that I have that are also sewing, because we can borrow patterns. So I think this is also a nice thing to do, to just glue it together and copy just your size. And if any friends of yours will have to copy it, they can buy you a coffee for that and borrow your patterns. Then the patterns that I copy from either the purchased patterns, the single patterns, or from the magazines, I store them also in envelopes, but you can see this is so much smaller. And this is, for example, for my biker jacket. This is all I have. This is the entire pattern on the thin paper for my biker jacket. So you can see this is a huge difference also in storage. So this is one of the other reasons why I prefer copying the patterns on the thin paper. Yeah, and what I also like doing is I write on the front on the envelope what it is. I also like making a sketch of the pattern. Then I write also from which magazine it is, with the date, with the number of the pattern, the size. And sometimes I also like writing how much fabric I will need for the certain thing, because over the years I learned to judge how much fabric I need for a shirt, how much fabric I need for pants or whatever, so I can kind of eyeball it and buy the right amount of fabric. But there are some projects that are new for me, and it's always best to have somewhere a note that tells you how much fabric you will have to buy, so that you don't buy too little or too much of the fabric. So that would be the patterns. And there is one last thing I always have at home, and I think this is also useful already at the beginning, or let me rephrase that. You can use it at the beginning if you are doing already projects where you need to make the fabric a little bit stiffer. It's probably not necessary if you're just starting with sewing on a rest of fabric, but once you start doing cleavage or sewing in a zipper or making interfacing, you will need iron-on interfacing. This is extremely helpful thing. Iron-on interfacing come in different shades. I have the white one, but I have also had a black one for dark fabrics, and they are differently thick. There are also iron-on interfacings that are stretchy for any stretchy projects where you just need to stiffen a little bit the edges. And what it is a fabric that has glue on one side that will be activated with heat. So you put the fabric, this they call it flizzoline here, but the iron-on interfacing, you put it on the fabric that you want to make stiffer and thicker, and you iron over it shortly. I mostly put a sheet of another fabric between the iron and the interfacing so that it won't get burned. You need to hold shortly, and then the glue will be activated and it connects with the fabric that you need to make stiffer, and this is how it works. So it's a great thing to have. I always have a little bit more of it. They are mostly very inexpensive. There is a store not far from Vienna where I can buy secondhand fabric, and this is where I also mostly buy my iron-on interfacing because it's super cheap there and it works great. But sometimes I have to buy it for full price at the sewing supply store, and it's not so bad, and you don't need so much of it. But it's always great to have some standards at home, and especially at the beginning, if you don't know which kind of iron-on interfacing you need. Mostly in the magazines it is written which type of interfacing you will need. They have numbers. I don't know if I will have a number here on the side of this one, and as it happens there is no number right now, but very often they come with an edge where it says the type. And if you don't know which one, just ask in the sewing supplies store. Just tell them what projects are you working on, what fabric do you use. You can even cut a little piece of the fabric and bring it with you and tell them this is what I work on and I need an iron-on interfacing, and mostly they are really nice. And actually in all the times that I needed an advice, they were always nice and they always give you a good advice. So There is one more thing that is just nice to have, but it can prove being extremely helpful later, especially when you will be working on any projects where you need to adjust the pieces on yourself and it would be difficult to do it yourself without help, and that is sewing dummy. So I have one behind me. Let's make the camera focus right now on her. I call my sewing dummy Hildegard, by the way, because I thought she deserves a name. So this sewing dummy is one I bought. They are quite pricey. This one is adjustable. Those 3 circles are for adjusting it around the bust, around the waist, and around the hips. I think I paid like 160 euros or maybe 180. I don't remember exactly, but it was really, really expensive. But you don't have to spend that much money, especially if you are planning on sewing just for yourself. You can make your own sewing dummy, and I have covered how to do that already in one of my videos, so I will link the video down below. And you can watch it. It's really quite easy, but you will need help for it, so you need a second person who will invest their time in helping you in making your own sewing dummy. So this is definitely something where you can save a lot of money, but if you have a little bit bigger budget, it is also great to have one that is adjustable, especially in a case when you plan on sewing for more people in future. But it is absolutely not necessary at the beginning, but I thought I'm gonna address it anyway, because if you're someone who likes to plan ahead, and if you're someone who is planning your further budget for your sewing supplies, then you might want to consider how much you need to put into your budget, so if you want to buy a sewing dummy. So I thought it would be useful to know that those are pricey also now. So that's my video for today. I hope that my today's video has been helpful for you. If it was the case, don't forget to give it a thumb up, and you can also share it with anyone who you think might profit from this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss any further projects and any further episode of this series. You can also follow me on Instagram. I have 2 Instagram accounts, one for DIY and crafts and one for food. I like sharing my food with recipes, so if you're interested in that, you're welcome to follow me there. Links are down below in the description box, and I will link down below the DIY video for the sewing dummy you can make yourself for the thread organizer, and also my playlist sewing. I think this is all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you with the next video. Bye!